I'm so grateful for all the wonderful conversations I've had in 2024 with the guest speakers of the Lifability podcast. You can find the full versions on all podcast platforms, including Spotify, Apple. It's also available now on YouTube. I hope you enjoyed these conversations as much as I did. And this is a little sneak peek into some of these conversations.
There is a reflex called Moro reflex, and this is a reflex that everybody or should have. When we are born, it's when danger comes to our surroundings, the little baby throws their arms up and then collapses in and starts crying for help. It's a reflex that allows me as a very young infant to call for help because, without help, we can't protect ourselves. But if that reflex doesn't integrate, and it should integrate by the age of 6 months, then whenever we are presented with a loud noise or something coming to us quickly, they could be sitting in the office and someone slams the door or someone raises their voice, we go into this fight-flight system. So in other words, this reflex activates, there's adrenaline running through the body, but there's nothing to fight. And so, these people often describe themselves as, always being on the edge, always sort of looking out for when the next danger is coming from. And that's really tiring. That's very difficult to be in a relaxed state, because you're always sort of half vigilant of where the danger is. And so once that reflex is integrated, suddenly people find that, they can be in these social situations and they are no longer so edgy. They are no longer, on the verge of fight flight. And that will, of course, have a broad effect on their energy levels, on how they interact, how they understand, on their sleep. So even just integrating a reflex like that can have a huge impact on many different aspects of their life.
So being able to connect with others authentically, but to do that, you really have to connect with yourself. And you really have to know yourself well enough to know how you might handle a situation, or how you might interact with someone, or why you interacted in a particular way, or why you were reactive. And if you were reactive, because that happens to everyone, you can take that step back, reflect, come back again and just acknowledge and be like, I'm sorry I did that. I felt triggered or I felt angry, and then you move on past it. Because I feel if people are stuck and they don't have the skills and the tools and the strategies to move forward with challenges, it becomes stagnant and stale, and it can, in a sense, almost fester. And then you've got that negative flow on effect that's going to impact all other areas of your life and the people around you as well. So when it came to what I was offering, I really wanted to tailor something that was clear, was defined, wasn't overcomplicated, and it focused on those areas that I feel are really important and are going to make a positive impact. So happiness, health, and harmony, and working together. And
But where there's certain debilitations, I definitely think the application of yoga is beneficial. And it means doing a quieter practice. It means a softer, gentler, more yin type approach to the practice. And, and it might not feel like they're achieving much. I don't know, but essentially it's around orientation and helping that person orientate and understand themselves in the process of the practice. So yeah, they're I guess not so hindered by their particular ailment or disease or whatever it might be. So yeah, I definitely think, especially with Iyengar yoga, there's so much application for the use of props in that regard. It's a very safe and very effective and a very efficient form of yoga.
When we talk about occupational therapy and mental health, can you tell us a little bit more about, why would someone go see an OT compared to a psychologist?
So OTs, I suppose we're more focused on functions. We're about supporting people to be able to engage in, I suppose, meaningful activities or occupations to enhance physical and mental health and well-being. So I suppose I can give you, there's a variety of interventions that OTs, particularly within the mental health space, can support people with. And it might include setting specific goals. So supporting people to attend to their self-care, showering, dressing, cooking, cleaning, meal planning. It might be about addressing sleep hygiene, supporting with sleep. It might include just developing a structured daily routine. I think that is meaningful to the person. I suppose also within the mental health role, specifically my role, I suppose we might support some people to develop coping strategies to manage anxiety, for example. We might support some people living with sensory processing issues, like developing strategies to regulate their sensory input, so looking at what's going on in their environment, and making some changes to support the person to regulate their emotions. Support people back into the community. So a lot of people that we work with are quite socially isolated. We might support them to reintegrate into the community. Yeah, I suppose there's lots of different things that OTs do. I guess that might be a little bit different to some of the other allied health professions.
Gut is directly connected to a nervous system, and it's called the enteric nervous system, which is part of the sympathetic nervous system. So that is a fight or flight response. So when you're stressed, when you're feeling overwhelmed, or when you're feeling anxious, the sympathetic nervous system is activated. So what it does, it's actually designed for our survival. It's designed to get us out of danger. So it's connected to different parts of the body, is what, apart from the muscles to go, right, let's get you running out of here, to the heart, but it's also connected to the gut. And what it does, it has a role when you're stressed. The role is survival. So let's get you out of here. Let's just support the organs that need support. And the organs that don't need support when you're trying to just survive, one of them is the gut. So there's a decrease in blood flow to the gut. There's a decrease in motility, movement. It affects stomach acid, digestive enzymes, even the gut microbiome, the gut bacteria changes with stress. Even the lining of the gut is affected by chronic stress. So it can cause things like leaky gut, where it's just not tight junctions, which can lead to autoimmune disease, intolerances. So it's actually a whole spectrum, and people can present quite differently, from irritable bowel to actually feeling quite unwell. So nauseous in the morning, vomiting, just feeling really awful. And interestingly, when that stress disappears, those symptoms disappear. But however, when they do present to the doctor, I even had a patient who I thought, does he need an endoscopy? Does he need to be investigated further, because it was so severe? But he was going through a high amount of stress during his exams, and all the symptoms disappeared as soon as the exams went away. So it's just a great example. When we're looking at symptoms, just think, is there a stress element? Yes, in all cases, as a doctor, you've got to rule out any red flags, so anything sinister, anything worrying, and that's the job of the doctor to ensure. But there's always an element of stress that we need to look at. So
mindfulness practice is a great way to start. So mindfulness doesn't have to be meditation. It can be, you can do mindful meditation, but you can also do tasks mindfully. And so I find with a lot of the people I work with ADHD, it can be nice to pick a task because the thought of meditating sounds just horrible to them that they can't. And that's a whole other thing we could talk about, that people's perceptions of what meditation should look like. But I really I've seen some neat ones where it's mindfully making a cup of tea, for instance. And so one could just slap the kettle on and do some other things and check their phone and listen to some music and all of that while the kettle boils, and fumble around and find a tea bag and be done with it. Or one could be very, very present with the whole process. So running the water, noticing the sensation of the tap when you turn it on. Notice the sound of the water as it's coming out of the tap. Do you notice a smell? Is there a smell? Is there a little bit of chlorine to the smell? Is it something a little bit more mineral? And maybe you feel the water with your hands, and when you put the kettle under the water, do you hear the sound? What does the kettle feel like? Is it cold? Is it warm? Does it make a tinkling sound when you tap it, or a metallic sound? What's that like? What does it sound like as the water gets fuller? Do we maybe it smells differently if you smell it in the kettle, and you put the kettle on, and can you stand there and take a few breaths and be present as you go about finding your teacup? And is that your favorite teacup? What do you notice about that? Is this one you really enjoy the feeling of the handle and the way that the weight of it in your hands, selecting the tea that you're going to use, and maybe your spoon for your sugar, and take that process very slowly and be present with it. Notice your feet on the ground. Notice yourself maybe feeling a little bit antsy about not doing other things while you're waiting for the water to boil. Notice when it does boil. How does the sound change in the steam? And as you pour it over your tea bag or your leaves, do you notice, is there a sound there? Is there a smell that comes about? Do you notice the color immediately, or is that a little bit slower as you slowly pour the water? And then as you wait, what can you notice in that time? What can you observe? Go through all your senses. What do you see? What do you hear? What do you smell? What do you taste? What do you feel?
Your nervous system, which is responsible for when you take in the world around you, it's responsible for the ensuing response to whatever is in your environment or whatever is happening in your life. That nervous system is intrinsically linked with your breath. Mm-hmm. So when you're scared, when you're anxious, when you're angry, whatever it is, it changes your breath, and usually to a really poor model of breathing. It'll usually go to mouth breathing and chest, which is what you do, or how your body gears up to fight something or flee from something. Right? That's what happens. It's a really bad model of breathing. Now, getting back to what I said earlier, the consistency of these perceived threats means that that's what happens consistently. We breathe like crap. It's how our nervous system is in its stress zone. This is super bad for our health. It suppresses our immune system, stops our digestion. Oxygen is our energy source. So when we don't have good oxygen levels, we're out of energy often. And so why I'm saying all this is that whilst the nervous system will shift your breath, What we aren't taught is that if we shift our breath, it will shift our nervous system, right? So if we breathe in a manner that is really calm and relaxed, the nervous system, it's in its nervous state, but it's like, but why are we breathing like everything's okay? And it takes a little bit. It's not just one breath and you're like, we're sweet now, nervous system. You got to keep on doing it. The nervous system go, no, we're scared of something. And you just breathe slowly through the nose, belly breathing. And it'll be like, no, but we don't like what the person over there just said. No, breathe slow again. And then eventually the nervous system says, well, if he or she is breathing like that, well, then everything must be okay. And so this is what us freedivers have learnt and know and have mastered, because we know that if we're about to dive deep on one breath, there is zero room for stress.
When we talk about a diverse microbiome, it's lots of different species within that. And that's because they have different roles. Some of them, are really helpful in breaking down certain foods. Basically, without getting too much into the nitty gritty, because it gets a little bit minute, is that these different bacteria are really helpful in supporting the overall gut health and function. And when we start to see lower levels of certain populations of these bacteria, yeast or fungi within the gut, that's when we can start to notice what we call dysbiosis, or an unbalanced gut microbiome. And we start to experience different kinds of gut issues, and they can manifest differently from person to person. But just basically, having that really diverse, broad spectrum kind of microbiome is just what we find in the research to be really beneficial in terms of a well-functioning gut.
Self-energy, when you're in your self-energy, that naturally calm, compassionate version of yourself, like self has no agenda. And if you've ever had, say you've had something really vulnerable and you've gone to a friend to share that, and they've just been able to hold you in that, like that's self-energy, and they've not tried to fix it or change it. They've just gone, oh, wow, like I can see that you're really hurting. And there's so much healing in that, like self-energy. I say this, it's your secret sauce, really.
The Silver Method is this dynamic meditation program. It's like a toolbox of techniques. It's, as far as I know, the original personal development program. I'm talking about the Western world here. It was founded by a man named Jose Silva. He did 22 years of research before this ever became a public program, and it became a public program back in 1966. So it's been around for over 55 years. It stood the test of time. I reckon about 10 million people have done it. They write up on posters, and that's 6 million. You won't find a negative review. It's the most powerful program. So in this toolbox, you literally have a technique or process to handle anything you'll ever face in your life, and you'll be completely self-reliant and self-empowered. So we start off with how to manage your inner dialogue, your negative self-talk. We also learn how to sleep anytime, anywhere, without the use of any medication or tablets. How to wake up every day without an alarm clock and feel refreshed. How to stay awake if you're getting drowsy on the road and you're driving, for example, you don't want to fall asleep. How to be more awake. We have a dream technique. The dream technique, I started to practice. Once I became a trainer, I thought, I haven't really practiced this technique. And through a dream, I'm just looking here to find my book, which I've just packed because I'm going on a trip. But I actually got the download to write a book, which I've written, called Living in the Flow, which came to me in a dream. That's also using the Silver Method. Then we have goal achievement and problem solving technique, like mirror of the mind. We have another technique just to really easily make a decision. How some people, including myself, struggled with some decisions in my life, like should I do this or should I do that, or do I take that job or do I leave this job? There's just a simple technique for that called the glass of water. And then we also have my favorite, which is it's like creating a mind sanctuary where you have in your mind, you create them two kind of guides or counselors or gurus, so to speak. One's a male, one a female, and you create them in your mind. Whether they're real or imagined doesn't really matter. And it sounds really simple and like, what's that about? But when you use the technique after being trained in it, it is so super powerful.
There's a liberation that comes from knowing that we can change our well-being through the actions that we take. And so for me, I think it's really important to schedule in my day. I'm going for a run here, and it's almost my non-negotiable. So I schedule it in my calendar like it's an appointment that I have to make. For example, yesterday, it was a beautiful day, and I had already seen my clients, and I'd given myself the afternoon to write reports. And I was sitting inside, typing away at my laptop, looking outside at the sunshine, thinking, oh my gosh, like I just need to get outside. I haven't moved my body today. And I think that self-care, that self-love that we still need to ensure that we integrate into our lifestyles as a busy business owner is of critical importance. If we don't do that, I know my report's probably going to suffer for it. I know the kids are going to suffer for it when they come home. Like I'm not going to be my best self, honestly. And so I looked at the time. I had 20 minutes that I had before the kids would come home on the bus. And I thought, you know what? It's going to be much more beneficial for me to get out in the sunshine, go for a run, listen to some music, come back, have a quick shower, and then pick up the kids rather than, spending that time writing my report. I can always catch up 20 minutes of report writing. That's okay. I can do that night when the sun's not out, but I can't make up that time in the day again to go running, because guess what? Tomorrow rolls around and then the next day comes around, and then you're constantly putting off the things in your life that really should be done today. So I think prioritizing your health and well-being and knowing that we can change the state of our mind through our occupations, so through the things that we engage in our day-to-day lives, I think is the most profound medicine. Don't be afraid of failure. Don't be afraid of getting things wrong. That's all part of the journey. That's all part of the learning, and we all go through something. But I think to navigate that easier, if you have someone who you can speak to who is a sounding board, it makes business life a whole lot easier, and it accelerates your progress. You get to where you want to go a lot quicker and faster because you're speaking to someone who's been there, who's done that, who's run into the same problems and challenges. You don't have to figure it out all by yourself. So yeah, I'd suggest getting the right people to support you on your journey is 100% something that's needed.
I worked with was a young woman on the autism spectrum who had a lot of chronic migraines and was being challenged to keep up with her schoolwork. She was taking college level classes and pulling D's and F's, really having difficulty with that. And so we started working with her, and I taught her some acupressure points and some tapping to help her keep her energy flows moving in between the sessions. And she started improving her grades. She started pulling A's. She was able to concentrate better in school, and some of her digestion issues were resolving. She started going to yoga and did seem to be thriving in school, and her migraines got better. She could tell once one was coming on, and instead of having several a week, she would just have one or two a month, and those would be very mild.
What they found with people with schizophrenia is that their brains are making a guess, but it's not the right guess. So their brain might be guessing that there's a voice there, and so they're hearing that voice, but that's actually not what's going on. So there's kind of a change in the brain in terms of, how that's going on. And for some people, that can kind of make more sense when we kind of explain that to them. And then I guess that can kind of lead to greater compassion and also more kind of opportunities for problem solving than some of the other ways.
The entryway of your home is the main mouth of chi. That is how good life force energy is coming into the space. So you want to make sure that it's clutter free, that it's beautiful. So like a nice, like welcome mat with flowers. The goal is to make it bright and inviting and beautiful, because that attracts the chi to come into the house. You can ring your doorbell like every day. Sound is such a good mover of energy, and that will help also like bring in good energy. Make sure that the door opens all the way. Make sure that it's in good working order. So the entrance is huge. And then the center of the home is the health center of the home. So if you were to stand directly in the middle of your space in your home, that is considered the health center. And you want to make sure that it's clutter free, that you open the windows, get good natural light. House plants are really, really good to clean the air, and, to improve indoor air quality. Anything that represents health to you, bring that into like the center of your space. And then the next main area is the bedroom, because we spend so much time in our bedroom, hopefully sleeping well. And so our bedroom it's the main things with that is make sure that you keep electronics out. If you can, I always have like a no phone zone, like just I don't allow phones in the bedroom. And the head of the position of the bed is very important in how you sleep. So you always want the head of the bed up against a solid wall. You want to be able to walk around both sides of the bed so there's good energy flow, and make sure that there's nothing stored under the bed. And just really soft earth tones, just very, you want to create a space that signals to your brain the second you walk in that it's time to relax and shut down and have a nice restful sleep. So, so earth tones are really good, nice soft fabrics on the windows, and And then just be mindful of what you consume in the bedroom. So reading is fine, but it's usually better to read anything stimulating, out in the living room or somewhere else other than the bedroom. After the bedroom, your workspace. So the whole idea is you want to look at and evaluate all the areas that you spend the most time, because those have the greatest effect on your body. So wherever you work, again, make sure you don't have your back up against the door. You might not be necessarily consciously aware of how having your back up against a door, your nervous system can't entirely relax that way. So it's good to be up against a solid wall behind you. So it's like mountain energy behind you. It makes you feel more confident. And just really, clear the clutter in your energy or your workspace.
If a person is, maybe they've had an injury, or if if they're recovering from some type of physical or mental imbalance or injury, I do think that going to somebody who is already trained in physical medicine and rehab, like an OT or a PT, that you're going to get more depth with your recovery, because OTs are trained to look at the person very holistically. And as you know, we're trained to assess activity analysis, meaning how is a person functioning physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually when they engage in a particular task? Where are their glitches? What is keeping them from being able to participate in a role, task, or activity to their best ability?
Trauma is one of the big blockers for people to healing, and we do store it in the water inside of our bodies. Bone has a lot of water in it, or fluid in it, so obviously so do our muscles, and most of our body is, well, 99% of the molecules in our body are water. So I would say definitely, like I've got a lot of patients that are storing kind of trauma or tension. Some of it is purely structural, so it could be they're using their jaw muscles to posture because the neck's not right, etc. So it's not necessarily an emotional or vibrational issue. It's purely a structural thing. But we have a lot of patients who, using the jaws to deal with the emotional side of things. Like, if something's not working, what do? We kind of clench our teeth and we, So what do? I use various mouth guards specific to the body type of somebody in order to kind of relieve things. And I work with osteopaths to help relieve those traumas as well, because we may not just have emotional traumas that we may store in our jaws and the associated muscles, but we can also have physical traumas that could date back to when we were born, or even how our arm and hands were when we were in utero in mum's womb. The delivery, whether was it a forceps delivery, was a vacuum needed, was the cord wrapped around the neck, was breathing difficult when baby was first born. All of these are considerations that with the questions that I ask my patients, because it gives me a clue as to kind of what was the initial trauma that may have set off their cranial and facial and dental development off on the wrong course. And what the osteopaths do is they don't just necessarily realign things, but they're also releasing trauma from different parts of the head and different parts of the jaw with the manual therapy that they do. And that release of the trauma is kind of removes the blockage that allows people to heal.
So there are certain things, certain areas of the body that are particularly important when it comes to inflammation. So the way it works is that if there's a problem in one area of the body, the cells in that area tend to send an alert out to the rest of the body saying, hey man, you need to get ready because there's a potential problem coming along. And so it's like this low grade of alert goes out. Now, as it goes out, you end up with this general level of inflammation throughout the whole body. And that in itself creates preconditions or makes it more likely you're going to develop disease. Now, one of the key areas of the body that tends to get inflamed is the gut. And the reason for that is generally we eat badly. Even if you eat well, you may not be realizing how certain particular food may be influencing the gut. So an example of that might be, say, gluten. Everyone knows about gluten. Some people would say, oh, yeah, I'm fine with gluten. And other people say, oh, that's a really big problem. Some people will say, oh, it's really, really big problem. I've got celiacs, right? So you don't have to have celiacs for gluten to be a potential problem or irritant to the gut. And the reason for that is that gluten itself interacts with the cells that line the gut. And it actually it signals to a little protein that manages the width of the gaps between the cells. It signals to them and it widens those gaps. Now, when you widen gaps like that, it means more stuff gets in. Now, some of that stuff shouldn't be getting in. And so when the body sees stuff pass through the gut into the blood, and that shouldn't be there, it gets upset. So it goes, oh my God, what are this doing here? So then it then initiates an immune response within the gut. So gluten just makes it more likely that your gut becomes permeable and more likely, therefore, you're going to get inflammation in the gut. It's for anyone. It's not talking about celiac person, anyone. So now, certain types of gluten are worse than others. So Australian gluten in the form of wheat is particularly bad because we modify our wheat to be able to handle drought conditions and or better handle drought conditions. And so our wheat here is not the same as wheat in Europe. So you have a lot of clients come along and they say, If I'm in Europe, I'm okay, but I come back here and it's a problem, right? So it's actually because the wheat is different. But wheat's not the only source of gluten, of course, but no matter what the source is, it has that impact on the gut.
So a blackout obviously is when the lights go out completely, but a brownout is when the lights start dimming. That when that happens in different organs, it will essentially cause a disease. That's how disease manifests. So, and tying that back to this idea of the different genetic codes is that you're not. How do you influence mitochondrial health and improve essentially the mitochondrial colony so that you're less likely to develop one of these chronic diseases? And the answer turns out that you really have to change your environment, and you have to change the environmental inputs that you're living in, and you're never going to be able to drug your way to optimal mitochondrial health, and you're not going to be able to get as good an outcome for health as drugging say some other nuclear gene problem, unless there's a very small number of diseases which are primarily as a result of a genetic problem in the nucleus.
I didn't know simple things like the importance of grounding and breathing. And I've just started, over the last 10 years, evolved in trying to incorporate as many of these into my well-being as possible. And now that I advocate that in my work to individuals and to groups, that if you can stand in the grass 3 or 4 times a week, barefooted, and lower your cortisol levels and breathe, there's a really simple biohack you can do in order to regulate your emotions.
And it always starts with the nervous system, doesn't it? Because we can try and, have all these hacks with our diet, with our movement, but if our nervous system is constantly in that fight or flight mode, then not really getting to the root, because we're just going to cause more inflammation. Well, this is where your journey of exploration continues. Please subscribe to the Lifability podcast so that you can stay tuned when new episodes come online. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram. The mission at Lifability is to inspire you to create a more fulfilling life for yourself and improve your quality of life. So why not share this podcast with your loved ones and create a ripple effect together? Until next time, Asante Sana.